Good afternoon. Welcome to the launch of the Project Report, a community empowerment journey addressing violence against women and girls. This afternoon session will last approximately 1.5 hours and will include keynote addresses from our distinguished guests. Please include any questions or comments you may have in the chat section, and we will address as many as we can in the Q&A session. This event is being recorded and will be available for viewing and sharing. The project will contribute to the creation of a violence-free environment for women and girls to participate fully, take control of their own lives, and enjoy greater gender equality. This is done by providing skills, confidence, and networks to bring about attitudinal and behavioral change in the wider community. This project is delivered by the British Council Sri Lanka in partnership with the Foundation for Innovative Social Development, Jaffna Social Action Centre, Janathakshan and Hashtag Generation. The target locations for the delivery of the trainings were 4 districts, 7 divisional secretariats, and 20 communities, namely Tellipalai and Kopai in Jaffna, Southwest and Vala Chennai in Batticaloa, Buttala and Madulla in Monaragala, and Valasmulla in Hambantota. This project would not have been possible without the support of our former country director, British Council Sri Lanka, Jill Caldicott. Jill championed the British Council's Gender Equality, Diversity and Inclusion (EDI) initiatives and was a fervent supporter at every step of the way. Here's a short message from her.
As you will see, there are many wonderful examples in this booklet. As we are all aware, violence against women and girls is an endemic problem, and not only in Sri Lanka, of course. And it really stems from deeply ingrained attitudes and social norms, a way of thinking about women and their role in society that is outdated, is prejudicial, and fundamentally undermines their human rights. COVID-19 and the global pandemic has only exacerbated this problem, as we well know. And addressing this is no easy task, and the change will not come quickly and easily. I just feel so pleased and proud that the British Council has so contributed to this journey. We have, over the past few years, increasingly engaged in gender-related work. And globally, we see this as an area of both importance and priority going forward. Women cannot begin to take their rightful place in society until and unless they are free from the fear and the reality of violence and abuse, both physical and psychological. So before I end, I would just like to thank our partners, especially the Foundation for Innovative Social Development, FISD, who have played the lead role in our collaboration, as well as our other partners, Jaffna Social Action Centre, JSAC, Janathakshan and Hashtag Generation. The work we've done together is a step in the right direction, and I hope we will find more opportunities to further the rights of women in society. Just a reminder that please do put your questions and comments in the chat section. We want to hear your views. We want to know that you are with us on this journey to find a better society for women and girls everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill, for such amazing words on this project. But let us now go into it in a little bit more detail. by looking at the overview of the project with Samita Sugatimala, Director Programs, FISD. Over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And I think it's my pleasure to give the overview of this interesting project, awesome project that we had for the last 2 years at this moment of the book launch, where we bring out our journey of community empowerment model that we have used in this project. So I will give a bit of an overview of our journey, where this whole project is a kind of done with the engagement of the community, starting with the community consultations that we had at the initial stages, where we did the problem analysis with women and youth, and where we actually did mapping and prioritizing of issues that are most relevant for women and youth in the communities that we have selected to do this project, and also where we engage them in a very interactive and engaged process of knowledge building and capacity building in a very residential 5 days kind of a training program. And after the engagement with the capacity building program, the community actually designed their own projects. They identified their own problems, and they themselves designed their interventions. And they actually got together at the community level and implemented the projects themselves. So it's kind of a there was a kind of a wider mobilization at the community level, where the women and youth who engaged in the project went back into their communities and engaged the men from the community, and also engaged the government officials from the district and at the divisional level, and also other community-based organizations who are part of the community development processes in their own localities. So the social action projects that women and youth selected to do in their communities were actually totally designed by them. And actually, they at the end of the project, they engaged in measuring the changes and bringing the lessons and good practices for wider sharing, both at the district and the national levels. So this is a kind of a very short understanding of the journey that we had with women and youths in this empowerment model, where we actually wanted to address violence against women and girls. So this the most important thing about this project is that it is a community-owned project. That is why the results, the good lessons learned, and also the good practices that came from the project is so much valuable. So the community actually had the understanding of the nature of the problems, and they actually looked at it from their own eyes. And when it comes to the implementation process, they knew why, how, who, what of the problems that they wanted to address at their own end. So when it comes to resources, I think most of the projects do not go into success levels because all the resources are coming from outside. So I think with this project, it is so important and so valuable that the communities, the women and the youth who engage in this project, they mobilize their own resources. And they actually mobilize their own community, mobilize their other groups in the community to bring resources into the project implementation. And ultimately, I'm so happy to say that the results are also owned by the community. So that is something that we actually wanted to highlight in this book launch. And when you go through the book later, after this launch, you will see the voices of the community people coming out with their own experiences and the changes that they actually contributed to. So the other most important thing that I wanted to highlight in this journey is the engagement of the partnership. And of course, this whole thing was supported by British Council, and they actually, from the beginning to the end, we worked as a team. We were as a kind of a one team trying to bringing in this social change. And as the FISD, the Foundation for Innovative Social Development, as the lead partner, we worked in partnership with three other organizations. That is Jaffna Social Action Center in Jaffna, and Janathakshan, and also Hashtag Generation, which is a very energetic youth organization that we have. So I'm so delighted to kind of introduce these partners, because they actually brought in the geographical coverage that we wanted to reach out, depending on the nature of the problem and how it had been scattered in Sri Lankan society. So we actually worked in Jaffna, in Batticaloa, in Monaragala, and in Hambantota. So we were actually covering the whole country in a way, in working with different groups of people coming from all corners of Sri Lanka. So these partners actually had years of experience in community empowerment, and they were able to bring those experience into this project. And of course, we were able to facilitate a wider stakeholder engagement through the partners. And the strong partnership with the British Council on youth and the youth and women empowerment model of British Council actually fitted well into the program design and the implementation. So the partners also had the national visibility and the recognition, the connections that they wanted to use at the national level to highlight and to kind of bring the particular results that we wanted to bring at even at the national level. So we actually worked along with the Minister of Women Affairs, and we actually linked the project with the National Action Plan on prevention of sexual and gender-based violence, and contributed a lot to the National Action Plan and its implementation process. So all the partners, they were able to bring in the technical expertise that is relevant to the project. So when it comes to the methodology that we used in this project, we actually cascaded the active citizens youth leadership methodology into this capacity building component of this uh, journey. And it was a kind of a methodology which has been tested with positive outcomes for years with different partners and different locations, not only in Sri Lanka but all over the world. And of course, we had a kind of a range of facilitators that we used who had years of experience working in this methodology, and we were also able to kind of bring them into the understanding of gender and sensitize them in gender perspective, and also bringing the aspect of putting this methodology into addressing violence against women and girls. So that was a quite success with the active citizens methodology that we used. So just to put things in perspective, our work actually emphasized how vital it is to listen to women and to young people then, and to listen to what they want to say about their own lives, their options in the change that they want to bring in, and their voices, and also their choices, what actually they wanted to do, and what changes they wanted to see in their communities. So this journey showed us that empowerment is not only about changing the boundaries of action, but also about shifting the horizons of possibility, because they were looking at all possibilities at their own end and trying to bring everything into the project. And through this journey, actually, women and youth developed the ability to create new situations, a new condition in their community, and new action, a new story actually, or kind of a narrative that they want to create for their own community. So um, I think this journey itself gave them power, because it was so much owned by them. When they are able to create something new for themselves, that becomes the pathway for their empowerment. And we have experienced it, and we have actually seen it from our eyes. So this project I'm so happy to say that created the enabling environment for women and girls to kind of continue their journey of empowerment. As we all know that empowerment is not a destination; it is a journey that we kind of bring in new actions, new learnings, new pathways on the way. So I think uh, I'm so happy to kind of be part of this project and be part of this launch today. And I'm sure that you will enjoy reading the book where we talk about this interesting journey. So I think thank you so much. You will I think engage with a lot of other people talking about this issue and also about this journey. So enjoy your afternoon, and we will be kind of if there is any question, any comment, we are happy to kind of come and give how we feel about it and talk about our perspective. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Samita. I think you also got a little bit emotional, and I think that when you love your project so much, it shows just through your words. Let us now look at the importance of engaging communities in to address violence against women and girls. To do that today, we have Kamani Jinadasa. She is the executive director, founder of Shanti Margam, and will now give us a little insight from her extensive hands-on work experience, including her research at CARE International. She is also a national and international expert in the fields of sexual and reproductive health, gender based violence, engaging men and boys for gender equality, and securing the rights of people living with HIV and AIDS. Here, Kamini, we would really love to hear what you have to say. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Good morning from Vienna, Austria. I totally appreciate this opportunity that has been given to me today to speak at this important event. I think one of the minor benefits of this pandemic is how people from across the world can be accessed online now for such events, and I feel extremely privileged to deliver this keynote address. And I'm especially thankful to my dear friend and colleague, Samita Sugatimala, for suggesting me for this role today. When speaking about the importance of engaging communities to address violence against women and girls in Sri Lanka, I thought of dividing my time into two main areas. Firstly, on community engagement around violence against women and girls in Sri Lanka, why we need to do it, the work and gaps. And secondly, around an area that we actually don't talk enough about, the core drive for this demanding work and how we can do it while sustaining ourselves. So on to part one. To talk about community engagement around violence against women and girls, let me just briefly touch on the key definitions. Gender-based violence is when someone experiences a sort of violence due to their gender, orientation, or expression. We tend to use the term violence against women and girls sometimes in conjunction with GBV, the reason being that violence against women and girls is very high in proportion to violence that men experience. And there's a whole range of abuses that women experience or females experience through their life cycle, through sex selective abortion and forced marriage to domestic violence and honor killings. Abuse by an intimate partner, IPV, is actually the most common type of intimate of violence against women and girls. And remember, violence against women and girls is a violation of human rights. Please bear with me as I transition into a slide. I wanted to talk about the root causes of violence against women and girls. We identify two core root causes, one which is imbalance of power, and secondly, gender inequality. This table or image that I have shown you is based on Laurie Heiss's socio-ecological framework on violence against women and girls or intimate partner violence. And you see that imbalance of power and gender inequality is how it is maintained across all these levels. For example, in the individual level, submissive femininity and dominant or toxic masculinity hold these imbalances of power and gender inequality. At the interpersonal level, which would be in relationships or within families, stigma, shame, and silence hold these two root causes. At the community level, we see inequitable norms and practices. And at the societal level, we know that discriminatory laws and policies uphold such root causes. And throughout, when looking at or using this framework on addressing violence against women and girls, it's also very important to look at the intersectionality. And intersectionality means how people are more affected or more vulnerable due to their religion, race, ethnicity, disability, or illness. So going on to actually how we address violence against women and girls, we usually look at a prevention and response approach. We have often used terms such as primary prevention, secondary prevention, tertiary prevention, which are more public health approaches or terminology. And this model that I am sharing now is what is being developed at a global level on gender-based violence and violence against women and girls. So the first area of preventing violence against women and girls, where you work at a community level, at a generic kind of level or whole of population level, is called universal prevention. Selective prevention works with higher risk families or groups to intervene early to stop violence from escalating. And this would be families or people who have already experienced violence, some sort of violence, or at higher risk, say, for example, because they are in an IDP community, etc. Response aspect looks at addressing the needs of survivors by the provision of services such as psychosocial support, healthcare support, and also working on improving the responses at institutional levels, such as with the police and health sector. So why do we need to address violence against women and girls in Sri Lanka? So I just wanted to share some key statistics. You can see them on the screen. And what you were seeing is, of course, we know that at least 1/3 of women experience intimate partner violence in their lifetime. We've heard of how a high percentage of women experience sexual harassment in public transport. I personally feel it's much higher. The other statistics show how, despite being a need for women to access services, there is a low access to responses by women. And also, you will see that there's a statistic here from actually the CARE study that I will be referring to later on, that only 3% of men who perpetrate sexual violence, including rape, only 3% actually face criminal charges. So there's a high sense of impunity and lack of accountability within our country. And another alarming statistic for me has been around the last one, where you see around 30% of men who have perpetrated their first rape between the ages of being 15 and 18. These are youth, and this is also from the CARE study. And the next highest percentage was around 60%, where men were between the ages of 20 and 29. And when we were analyzing the statistics, we realized this was actually where marital rape can be perpetrated. And in Sri Lanka, we know that marital rape has not been criminalized. And to expand a little more on the statistics and also on masculinities, which I feel is needed to talk a bit more about, because I feel this is also a gap in the work that we do in Sri Lanka. So some of you may be quite aware of this study. This was done in 2013. I was the project director for this project as well as for this study. It was a study that was conducted in 4 districts with 1,700 men, and the data was validated by 600 women. And this study was done in collaboration with Partners for Prevention, an Asia Pacific regional UN organization. And the statistics here, though old, would not change substantially unless there's been some kind of long-term behavioral change intervention committed or conducted in such communities. Sorry. So one of the most compelling slides for me, or statistic for me in this study, was this. So the study was conducted in a way that people answered the questionnaire themselves. They used a gadget where they were entering the details, and the question was asked around how many of you have actually perpetrated rape, inclusive of sexual violence. And from that sample, it was asked, okay, what were your key motivations? And within this sample that admitted to sexual violence, including rape, 66% said that they did it, their motivation was sexual entitlement. And we see that this sense of sexual entitlement is something that comes from toxic masculinities or masculine norms. This sense of, oh, I can behave in a particular way in any way I wish. And for me, I firmly believe that if we can address these attitudes or these norms of sexual entitlement or sense of impunity to do whatever you want, I feel that we can really substantially reduce violence against women and girls. The other areas that they cited or motivations were that they were fun or bored, or they were feeling anger and they wanted to punish, or they were under the influence of alcohol. This slide is also very revealing because from the men who participated in the survey, we asked how many of you actually experience abuse in your childhood. And out of the sample, 38% admitted to have experience in physical child abuse, 28% sexual child abuse, and a very high rate of emotional child abuse, etc., etc. And the research goes on to show how there's a correlationship between these experiences, these childhood experiences, and perpetration of intimate partner violence in men's adulthood. This takes me to the next slide. So this study was part of a 6-country study, and a final report was issued by Partners for Prevention called the UN Multi-Country Study on Men and Violence. And it collated all the data from all 6 countries and showed what were the key factors, the risk factors associated with men's perpetration of intimate partner violence. So you will see the larger the circle, the larger the correlationship or the possibility or probability of the perpetration of intimate partner violence. So you see the larger circles being experiences of childhood emotional abuse or neglect, frequent quarreling with the partner, transactional sex, or more than 2 lifetime sexual partners. Other serious co-relationships would be witnessing the abuse of a mother, childhood physical or sexual abuse, depression in adulthood, alcohol abuse, transactional sex, controlling behavior, and low gender equitable attitudes. So this becomes really important when we talk about, okay, what are the other frontiers we can explore in Sri Lanka when we do this work on preventing violence against women and girls. The next slide is actually to talk a bit more about, okay, what is the evidence saying? And this slide and the information I will be sharing is from global level evidence analysis. And here again, you can see Laurie Heiss's model, the social ecological model on violence prevention. So there's individual, at the individual level, relationship level, community level, and society level, the interventions have been cited. But I will just stick to the community level interventions because this is the subject of today's launch. So there are 3 key interventions that are actually identified as having a strong impact, and I heard Samita referring to most of these during her presentation. So number 1, the core features were firstly around group-based interventions, which combine group-based workshops with men and women, or adolescent boys and girls. These are often termed gender synchronized approaches and may combine single and mixed sex sessions. So there's a need to have both genders involved. These participatory workshops engage participants in critical reflection around gender roles and behavior. And the successful work is really where the work is, or the sessions are accountable or keep a strong space for women's voices and for what they want to see happening or changing in their communities, which Samita referred to in her presentation as happening in this intervention as well. Another key area of intervention has been the community-based mobilization or activism programs, which also is another key feature in the programs mentioned by Samita under this project. And here you see the use of multiple interventions at community level to shift harmful attitudes, behaviors, and norms that underpin gender inequality and violence against women. But one of the key things is the need and the focus of working and developing the capacity of these volunteers. And these programs usually work through carefully selected, trained, and mentored community activists, and are long term successful interventions which at least last for 2 years. And the activists work in teams and use a range of materials to engage in structured discussions and activities with men and women in the community around power, gender, and violence against women. The third area that has been identified as being highly successful is also the aspect of social marketing or edutainment. These programs use mass communication such as TV, radio, social media, and billboards. And it's more around changing social norms in communities or where you are working. And this type of intervention is used to communicate messages to large numbers of people at relatively low cost to change social norms around violence against women and girls. And they look at raising awareness on the laws and services and challenges around violence against women and girls. So I will go back, I will end the screen sharing for a moment. So in my view, I feel that what actually needs to be improved within the Sri Lankan context, especially around community engagement work, it's extremely encouraging because there are a lot of these aspects that have been brought up and addressed in this project. But I think one of the key aspects is that we need long-term interventions. We need projects that last for about 5 to 10 years at least. That would be fantastic because behavioral change takes time. Even if you look at yourself, you need that time to change, and it needs to be sustained. It needs to be true. It needs to be authentic. And you need space and time for self-reflection. Otherwise, you face the danger, or if you do it for a very short time, or you do, these 1 or 2 workshops or speeches or, I don't know, programs in communities, you actually perpetuate the same power dynamics that we're trying to break through. And remember, the abuse of power is one of the key reasons of violence against women and girls. And the challenge we face is that funding is so limited and also limited to a very short time. And so I feel this needs to change. Also, another area is that we need to address intersectionality. In Sri Lanka, we are a diverse people. Within various religious groups, also there's diversity, and we need to really spend time to analyze and look at this, which has also been done in this project. And we also, what the evidence is saying is to work across all levels of the socio-ecological model that I mentioned, where we work at from the individual to the relationship to the community and societal level to have a long-term impact. As done in this project, another area I feel that needs to be worked on is opportunities, creating more opportunities for organic networking to support women's groups. I also feel that we place a huge burden on women in this work. And as the CARE study shows, you can see there's a huge need to work with the potential perpetrators and the perpetrators. And we really need to start focusing on this a lot more. We need to address and deconstruct these harmful masculine norms through a long process of engagement and self-reflection across all levels and across all age groups. One of the other areas that I feel that we are very weak in Sri Lanka is around evaluating our work. It takes a lot of money, and funding is also very limited, and usually we have to put in a lot for the programming work. But we really do need to focus more attention on this. We need to move away from saying numbers as saying so many people participated to actually the qualitative, to produce or present what is the actual change that has been created. That means going to a more of an outcome level based evaluation of the work. And also we know that there's the politics of research in the global community. We find that most of this research, expensive research, is done in the global north, but Sri Lanka has enough technical capacity to do this kind of work, and we really need to have people who will fund this kind of work in Sri Lanka so we can sustain and replicate this good work that we're doing. For me also personally, and something I'm seeing more of, and for me also has really influenced my work, is understanding more about how children become perpetrators of violence and how children learn to remain in abusive situations in adulthood. And the research is showing that this is a very important area to focus on. And once again, I will be transitioning to a slide just to emphasize a bit more about this. So the evidence is saying, and this information is from the RESPECT manual that was published by WHO and UN Women last year. Globally, over half of all children aged 2 to 17 have experienced some form of abuse in the past year. And there's a strong nexus or relationship between violence against children, VAC, and violence against women. They often co-occur in households, and children living in households where the mother is being abused are also more likely to experience violent disciplining or abuse. And if we look at the statistics in Sri Lanka, we can see that there is a lot of abuse happening towards children. You see some of the statistics on this slide, and there is a real need to start working more with children in ways so that we look at we take a life cycle approach to reduce the perpetration of violence in in societies. And the evidence, early evidence, has been showing that these four key areas of interventions at this level have worked. For example, number one is having parenting interventions that address intimate partner violence and child maltreatment. The second intervention approach is on life skills or school-based curriculums, which include also rape and dating violence prevention training. This type of intervention includes curriculum-based approaches to promoting gender equality and addressing peer and relationship violence. The third approach is on home visits and health worker outreach. This is because health workers are more likely to see violence happening within homes. We know that the midwives in Sri Lanka visit families where a woman is pregnant, prenatal and antenatal care. So there is ability for them to be able to identify if there's a case and to then address it, and also thereby reduce the risk of a child within the home experiencing child abuse. And number four, the intervention approach that is being proposed is providing psychological support interventions for children who experience violence and who witness intimate partner violence. And I think you might remember the slides I showed on the masculinity studies where we see the correlationship also between these aspects. So this also brings me where I wanted to very shortly for a very short time talk about Shantimargam, my organization in Sri Lanka, where we were really influenced by the care study data and all these correlationships of factors and risk factors and perpetration of intimate partner violence in adulthood. So the aim is about reducing violence within communities and working specifically with adolescents and youth, creating a safe space for children to heal, to have discussions. And if we look at the four interventions I mentioned before, it specifically looks at providing life skills and curriculums around looking at gender inequality, etc., and also providing psychosocial support on trauma. And once again, we also face the issue of not having enough funding to actually evaluate our work, even though we're 4 years old. So that's what I wanted to say there, transitioning away from the slides. I wanted to now move to the second part of what I wanted to speak about today. And this is drawn entirely from my personal experiences and observations. It's very personal, the core of why we do this work. And I think all of us, I know my colleagues on this panel, it's out of a compassion for others, and we don't want other people, women and children, to experience this kind of violence. And in the same way, then, I would also encourage people to extend that compassionate approach to everyone we engage with in this work. We need to walk the talk. We need to be honest enough to check in with ourselves. Have I perpetrated any type of violence, emotional, verbal, while I am implementing my work to reduce violence in communities? And also, I would like to urge people to extend also that compassion to people who are perpetrators, because there's a saying, hurt people hurt people. So we need to kind of understand more what is it that is driving men to perpetrate violence in their adulthood. And the studies on masculinities is showing the nexus between these things. Empathy is an important aspect that we need to remember as a core principle, I believe, because how would I feel if people are coming into my homes and my spaces to do this work? And for me, I feel there's a strong and important duty of care that we owe to communities that we work in. We need to adopt a real strong sense of professionalism. In Sri Lanka, we don't have real courses on, I think there are emerging courses, but to really keep us up to date as to what are the processes, how should things be done, and how we also maintain principles and integrity when we do this work. And for me personally, I was the need to read and stay educated about the new trends is so important. I mean, for me, when I went to Johns Hopkins for my master's, I felt terrible because I realized there was so little I knew, and I have already done so much community engagement work. And it made me realize the real need to have that responsibility to know and to keep also my team members who work in communities aware of the knowledge and the new trends. And also the ethics of do no harm. Are you using your power in unhealthy ways in your work? And then another area that we don't talk enough about is our self-care when we do this work, because working on violence against women and girls is very tough. It's very demanding. It's some of us have experienced it, and we are reliving our memories. There are triggers, and it's frustrating because also we are always under-resourced in terms of funding, in terms of staff with capacity, and we are constantly needing to convince people as to why this work needs to be addressed. Sometimes it's like hitting your head on the wall every time. And so at this point, I also want to urge my colleagues to draw the line and boundaries and to be kinder to themselves or to ourselves when we do this work, to breathe and have your own tribe that you can lean on. So these are the two key areas I wanted to touch on today in my keynote, which I hope have been useful. But in conclusion, I wanted to say that I would like to acknowledge and honor all my incredible sisters and brothers who have worked tirelessly on this work, including the organizations that participated in this project. I would like to honor and acknowledge our 4 mothers who were courageous enough to step up and step forward so we could carry this baton, which we need to keep passing on to the next generation. Our work receives little recognition and is rarely lauded, but collectively, we have saved lives, reduced many people's experiences of violence, created opportunities of healing, and inspired others to rise up and move forward with hopes for a safer and peaceful tomorrow. Let's keep this torch burning. Thank you.
Thank you, Kamini. As we try to keep this torch burning, let's go into our next segment. Here we have Charo Lano, the Active Citizen Master Facilitator from Northern Ireland, UK, who is an experienced trainer on gender mainstreaming, anti-discrimination, anti-racism, and diversity. Charo was the lead trainer and consultant for the Empowering Communities to Address Violence Against Women and Girls project. Let's listen to a short message now.
we have been able to reach more than 70 countries. And in the world, there is like more than 1,000 facilitators and 250,000 active citizens. When we say active citizens, is we mean people that believe that they can make a change, that they can be the change they want to see in the world, that they have the passion to make a better world for everyone. And the Active Citizen Program is a social leadership program that has a belief that we are globally connected, but locally engaged, in the sense that we are connected. There is an interdependence among all of us, but we can actually apply and do something at the local level. We use a methodology that we use a metaphor of a river, and the metaphor of a river starts with ourselves. It starts like when the river is like just a stream coming down from the mountains, and it's like starting with ourselves to start to understand who we are, our identity, our cultural background, our beliefs, our values, to understand why we do what we do, what is important for us, to understand what are the things that we are carrying with us, what are the things that we want to carry in the journey, what are the things that we can leave behind. Then we explore when two streams meet, and it's like you and me. When we meet with someone else, maybe someone else that is that share our views, or maybe someone else that doesn't. And then the skills that we invite people to explore is dialogue and how we relate with each other. Learning how to listen and learning how to ask questions are two skills that we invite social leaders to acquire. And then we explore in the river, when the river gets wider, we explore the we together. And the we together can be a little bit more complex because there's more diversity, and at the same time more reach, because it gives us the possibility to have the collective power. And then after that, we explore, so what can we do about this? What are the actions that can be implemented? That is the learning journey for the active citizens. In the case of Sri Lanka and in the case of this program, we adapted that methodology to address violence against women and girls. It was quite challenging because we had to use different lenses to see how can we adapt this active citizen program to something very specific. But let's remember, this is a problem that is not only for Sri Lanka. This is a problem that is global. It's global and affects so many women and girls. But the most important thing is to remember that this is not only a problem to be addressed by women and girls. This is a problem to be addressed by the society. We are all responsible, and we can all do something. And this program that the booklet is launched right now, this booklet, A Community Empowerment Journey, exactly is that. It's a community. It takes a community to address the challenges. It takes a community to reflect and to decide what to do next. I congratulate this program. I congratulate all the partners that have been involved because this is not only important for Sri Lanka, but you can actually show other parts of the world what you have done, how you deliver this program in collaboration. And thank you very much for listening, and I wish you well.
Thank you, Charo. As an active citizens facilitator, I went down memory lane with that short conversation. Next up, we have Senel Vanyarachi, co-founder and a director of Hashtag Generation, which is led by a group of young, tech-savvy Sri Lankans working towards building a society where everyone has their skills, information, and tools to be active participants in making the decisions that affect their communities, technologies, and bodies. Sanal and his team at Hashtag led the social media campaign Her Safe Space for the project Empowering Communities to Address Violence Against Women and Girls, and will now share insights of the Her Safe Space social media campaign and extracts from the book. Over to you, Sanal. Sanal, I think you're on mute. You're not audible. It's an issue with your mic. Can you just check? Don't worry, everyone. There's always technical glitches on a live stream like this. Please be patient. I can't still hear you, Sanal. No. Can you refresh and then come back? Thank you. So while he's sorting out his connection, and then just know that you can always ask us questions. We already have a lot of the Active Citizens team, even from UK, as well as our former country director, who's also responding on the messages. So if you have anything and you want to talk about, if you have any questions from all the discussions we've had so far, please feel free to do that.
Hello, hi. Safra, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I was getting a mild panic attack over here.
Don't worry, things happen. Over to you, Sanal.
Thanks, Safra. So I will repeat what I possibly mined for the past minute. It's been a great opportunity to be here in this panel and also to listen to all of the other speakers before as well. My responsibility this afternoon is very specific. I will speak on the First Safe Space social media campaign that we launched and rolled out as Hashtag Generation, but also a little bit about the booklet that we're launching today as well. And I will share my screen now just to share some slides with all of you, and I hope that you can see them. So as I said before, my intervention was focused predominantly on Her Safe Space campaign, which we launched on social media, especially on Facebook, but also on Instagram and Twitter, where we covered all of the different activities and the phases of the project. But we also tried to create a conversation about violence against women and girls using the opportunity of the social media campaign as well. As the social media campaign was trilingual, that was something that was very important for the project team and also us as Hashtag Generation. And everything we've done as part of the project and also outside has been trilingual, and it doesn't make your work easy, but especially in a context like Sri Lanka, and especially when we're talking about issues like violence against women and girls and gender equality, it was very important to us that all of the messaging was trilingual. Um, so as all of the other speakers highlighted before as well, violence against women and girls is a very important topic, but it's also a sensitive topic. So it's also something quite sensitive. It was something quite sensitive for us to think about communicating. So it was something that we put quite a bit of thought into, because it was quite a big responsibility as well. Now, Samita spoke about how changing attitudes of people was a part of the kind of theory of change of the project itself. And I think that's where some of the aspects of the social media campaign came in as well, because we also tried to use social media in this aspect of changing attitudes and also giving a platform to some of the participants of our project as well. So what we see a lot during social media campaigns and so on issues like gender-based violence and so on. We see a lot of expertise being shared, a lot of academics and so on sharing being a part of social media campaigns on gender-based violence and so on. Our approach is different. Of course, that type of campaigns are also important. It's important for us to see the important analysis and data and so on. But the approach for this particular campaign was different. We tried to highlight voices that we were reaching through the actual project and bring those to a national audience through the social media campaign. So as you can see on the screen, we tried to focus on the voices of the women we met, the youth we met, and the men we met through the different trainings, and also the service providers that we reached out to during the training process as well, and tried to amplify their own voices. And we felt that these would impact better because then people in their communities would see them come up on social media and so on, and they'd be seen as role models that people can look up to in the community as well. So as I said before, violence against women and girls is also quite a sensitive issue. So it's something that required us to think about when rolling out and designing this communications campaign. So we didn't want to create this wrong binary of a kind of a and paint a picture of a woman who is always a victim and powerless and so on, because that's not the type of women we met through this project. We met women who are kind of changing their communities, confronting violence that was happening, and changing the narrative about violence and youth. So we wanted to think about how we can also express, while we were talking about stories of violence, how we can also tell stories of power, about agency, and about people of strength and people that were changing their communities. So that's something that was important for us, and that's something I think we were able to do to a certain extent quite successfully as well. So as you can see here, we were able to reach 88,955 people through the campaign. And I put screenshots of some of the comments. A lot of it is positive, but there are also the occasional negative ones. I think the negative comments are important because it then shows to us that we are reaching an audience that doesn't necessarily agree with us, especially on social media with our algorithms and so on. It's really easy to create content, especially on issues like this, and share it with audiences that necessarily agree with you, who then go on to like and share the content. But when you get negative comments, then it shows that you're kind of bursting that bubble a bit and then approaching audiences that don't necessarily agree with you as well. Now, a little bit about the booklet as well that we are launching today. So as civil society, as organizations working on different very important issues, we do a lot of work on the ground, on even communication sometimes, but we do very little to document what we actually do. We do very little to document the successes, but also the failures, the lessons learned, what could have been done differently, and so on. And sometimes this information is captured only as part of either a donor report, which is submitted internally and not shared with other partners, or it's just lying on some email or a shelf somewhere and not actually shared with a wider group, which is also working on similar issues. So this is important to us, which is the thinking behind the booklet itself. We tried to capture the voices of the people we met, the methodology that we used, what we think worked, what else we think other groups that want to work in these issues can do in the future as well, and what other recommendations that we have. So we use the booklet to feature voices of also the people that we spoke to, and we curated this content with a lot of thought and care, and try to amplify some of the voices. So during the social media campaign, as well as while putting the booklet together, consent was also something that was important to us. We spoke to everyone that we featured and spoke to them about why we are speaking to them and how we are going to use their information and the messages that they shared as well. And that was also something that was communicated to them, especially because of the sensitivity of the issues that we are talking about. That actually brings me to the end of the presentation. I hope this gives you a glimpse of the social media campaign as well as the thinking behind the booklet itself as well. And I hope I hope all of you I hope to answer any questions that you have as well going forward. But at the moment, thank you very much for listening to me, and thank you for the opportunity to speak here, but also be a part of this project as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sana, for giving us a little insight about the work that you're doing in Her Safe Space. So remember to go on your Facebook or Instagram and check out the hashtag Her Safe Space so you can see the work for yourself. And as always, remember to include your comments and questions in the chat. And following our next conversation, we will bring them up so we can talk about it in more detail. So, our next speaker is an amazing woman. She is Maitri. She is the executive director of Viludu, which works with youth, women, local government bodies, the private sector, and the media, especially in the Tamil speaking areas of the north and the east. She represents Viludu as a member of the Open Government Partnership CSO Steering Committee in Sri Lanka, Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka Gender Subcommittee, and the Global Partnership for the Prevention of Armed Conflict. As you can see, she has a diverse range of experience, and we would really love for her to tell us a little bit about what is her hands-on experience in Sri Lanka and how we can help change communities in the long run. Over to you, Maitri.
Thank you very much, Safra, for that very warm welcome, and hello to everyone tuned in right now. So violence against women and girls, it's a very broad subject and it's all encompassing. When I say it's all encompassing, we usually think about the physical violence and sometimes we extend to the mental aspects of it, but more often the structural, social aspects of violence against women and girls is something that we sometimes neglect. And I thought I'll take this opportunity to dive in a bit more, specifically given that, through Viludu, my experience has been a lot to do with mobilizing grassroots women's groups to really take in through their perspectives as to what it is to have community women really engage in this kind of process. And in terms of really reflecting on the fundamentals, just a few. And why we should, why I thought I should do this is because I started way back in 2007, right after school, coming in, specifically focusing on Jaffna and Batticaloa. One of my roles was to really understand the issues faced by the women and the challenges that they were trying to address. And one of the examples would be, child marriage, school dropout rates being really high. And that was in 2007. Coming back to 2020, all the way now, 10 years after the war, we're still talking about, school dropouts. We're still talking about child marriage. And these are serious human rights violations. And so what's really important here is that these violations have persisted continuously throughout. And another important factor that we have to recognize is that the change of the issue itself, whereas it is still child marriage, but the issues that are contributing to the problem of child marriage and the resulting issues because of that is also transforming in its way, because the conflict is transforming in different forms, the context is transforming, and there are also the issues also transforming. So one of the first fundamental aspects that we as practitioners really have to respect and acknowledge is the socializing of women, really silencing them. And when I say silencing them, I can explain it more through an example. Recently, just a month ago, we had a small discussion bringing in women from all parts of the country, and this included women from Jaffna and Batticaloa as well. And one of the subjects of the discussion was on menstruation and menopause. And the women shared, a lot of things, their physical challenges, social stigma, the workplace, schools not being gender sensitive in their structural or practice in terms of these issues. But what was really striking throughout that discussion is that women are, from the get-go, we are taught that we have to endure all these things in silence, where we don't even recognize certain things as our human right. We don't recognize that, okay, like maybe this is something that we can hold someone accountable, that this is a need, this is a right. So all of these things. So the very fact of getting a community women's group to say, okay, like what are your issues? You are breaking not glass ceilings but concrete walls. In order to break the silence is one of the major steps that have to be taken, and it's necessary because just to, like, for example, sexual abuse, sexual bribery, those kinds of issues won't factor in a usual community discussion, your first time community discussion, because the women are not going to open up about those kind of really sensitive issues, issues of violence that are connected with social stigma. So it's necessary to dive in deeper. Like for us, one of our discussions, community discussions in Batticaloa, they said sexual bribery is not an issue. And then on reflection, we specifically had the opportunity to talk to a DS officer, a former DS officer, and he spoke about the prevalence of sexual bribery, how he had to arrest, take action to arrest a specific government officer because it was so serious, and how he had really advocated for, online complaints mechanisms so that the women, don't have to come in person to make these complaints, or that they're protected in some way while they're making these complaints, and these complaints are being heard. So there was this huge system that they were trying to do, but it didn't come out in the community consultation. And therefore, as practitioners, we really have to dive in deeper and really, when we say engage, understand the community and engage with them from the very inception. The second fundamental that I wanted to reflect on is when we say women, it's like a blanket rule. It's like women, that's it. It's a homogeneous group. It's not. Women include a diverse range and kinds of people. If I was to just focus on Jaffna and Batticaloa alone, we have minority women, rural women, women affected by the conflict, women displaced multiple times, women heads of households, which is a diverse group of it, in itself, where you have widows, women whose husbands or other family heads are missing or disappeared, or young women living alone or with dependents, older women living alone or with dependents, families of the missing and disappeared are also in this. So it's a wide, I can go on and on and on. And it's an evolving group because recently in the northern province, drug and alcohol abuse is a really severe and serious problem. And so the women are saying, okay, we had traditionally male heads in our family, but these members are now unable to, meet their needs, unable to meet the needs of the families. So therefore, now we are heading the, household. We are the head of this family, and so there is that transitioning, evolving process for the group itself. So where you are placed, in terms of in various aspects of the society, geographically where you are placed, all of that matters. Particularly for Jaffna and Batticaloa, because of the confluence of patriarchy with militarization, the impact of the conflict and its continuing forms really requires us to have a special lens to understand these issues, and also really radical innovative approaches in addressing them. When I say we have to really understand the issues, it's not a matter of just listing out, what are the issues in Batticaloa, what are the issues in Jaffna. It's not a linear line. It's more interconnected and it's like a labyrinth. So, for example, if I take microfinance, which is a huge problem in Sri Lanka and particularly for Jaffna and Batticaloa, if I take just that and say, okay, we're going to go ahead and address microfinance, which is a huge problem, we see that because of microfinance, there are huge suicide rates among women, particularly, for example, in Batticaloa. In the last 1.5 to 2 years, the community women recognize that there are over 52 women who have committed suicide because of microfinance. In addition to that, you will have like coupled issues such as sexual bribery, sexual exploitation, intimidation, physical harm towards women by men armed with knives. So these are things that you think you would see in a masala Tamil movie, but this is their reality. And so you have a range of problems coming out of that, even for the children, where there's a high rate of school dropouts because the parents go missing because they can't pay back these loans, and the children are literally just left to fend for themselves. But if we move towards the other side of the spectrum in this labyrinth, then we also have
Hello, everyone. I think she just momentarily got stuck through her connection, but maybe we can move into the panel and then bring out her aspects back at the last bit of it. So to do that, can I now invite back four keynote speakers, who is Kamini, Samita, Sanal, as well as Maitri when she gets back on her connection. So remember, throughout this conversation, you can actually ask us questions on chat. We've already had quite a few so far, so we will try as much as we can to address all of them. So to begin with, Kamani, since Shanti Margam is working towards creating a safe space for young people who are vulnerable to violence, how vital is it to have mechanisms to empower young people as change makers who could positively influence the harmful gender norms in their societies? How do you think we should address this? You're on mute, I think, at the moment. Say something? No. No, I can't hear you. No, still no. Maybe you can refresh and then I can move. Hello? Okay, cool. So while her connection is being sorted, Samita, what would you say are the main challenges that people have had, that women have had to face through this project journey?
Well, talking about the project journey, I think we observed that women had few issues. The first thing is to kind of, give their full participation to the project from the initial stages to the end of the project. So we at the project as the kind of implementers of the project, as facilitators of the project, we had to accommodate a lot of and we have to create a lot of space for women to kind of participate on their own pace, so that we actually, although this particular methodology, just to give one example, although this particular methodology or the training program is 5 days residential program, which because it was so comprehensive, we actually scattered it into non-residential and different days, so that women can come at their own liking, on choice, and get together and come from their communities. So all the training programs had 2 days and 2 days, and then one day at the community level. It had so many different ways of alternative methods. So that is one thing, and they actually had issues of mobility, and we try to accommodate that through our facilitation. And the other thing is that when it comes to women's own thinking, I think the most challenging part was that women kind of putting themselves into a very lower position, or kind of having self pity, and kind of thinking that this is their own fate, that they have to undergo violence and nothing can be done about it. So until they kind of engaged with us and had this conversation going, they actually was thinking that violence was something private and that they should not talk about it in open. So all these things, I can talk about 100 things, and for the matter of time, I will just mention these few issues as the most challenging things that we had with women actually had when engaging in the project.
Sure. A constant question that has come up is, how do you support young women from rural areas? And how did you bring out through this learning journey of the river of me and you, we together, as well as bringing out a change? How did you support these women throughout this trip?
You are asking me, right? Okay, so talking about young women, I think most of the
Specifically to
time,
rural women. That's the question. Like, how do you support rural women who don't have access?
yeah. So I think as I linking to my earlier answer, women mostly had difficulties in coming out from their homes, coming out of their communities. So actually, when we are working with the rural women, we need to create the space within their own communities, so that they are at a very kind of comfortable environment, and they kind of they can um, support each other. And most of the time, women actually came as groups. So we work with women collectives. That's the most, I think, viable model that actually worked at the community level, rather than just working with women individually. And mostly, like we have seen that most of the project goes into the communities and work only with the women leaders that they can recognize or identify within the communities, who are leaders of CBOs or leaders of women societies. But mostly talking with when it comes to empowerment, we always talk about power with, where women come as collectives, and that they kind of share their own understanding, share their own challenges, and come together and decide how they want to solve these issues. So I think we mostly if we try to kind of address or kind of engage rural women, we have to do it at the rural setting and with the understanding of their own environment.
Thank you, Samita. I think Maitri has a few comments to add to that.
Yeah, just to share with everyone, the experience that the learning that I had in Buddha is really, what she was saying, Samita, that there's something really powerful when women stand with women. And it's not just inspiring, it helps the movement, it helps in the sustainability of that process. Like for example, we had when we were promoting the Widows Charter, we had a woman listen to a story from a woman from the family of the disappeared. And then she said, a country that sleeps at night, knowing what has happened to you and knowing what is happening to you, it's a country that is going to sleep through all my problems. And that kind of solidarity is something that really helps us move forward. And especially for collectives, community collectives, especially in rural areas, I think we have to have them engage in a multi-pronged way. at least, post COVID, I would say a minimum of three approaches. One is the immediate response process, where, there's always something that you have to do immediately. You have to save women who are being abused, you have to close down illicit liquor shops. So, like that, there's always something that has to be immediate and very responsive to that immediate disaster or need. The other is the long-term approach, where long-term you're looking at changing, gender norms in your society, long-term reform, policy, legislation that you're looking at that is going to provide you that structural social support, to reducing violence against women. But the third thing post COVID is that, when it comes to disasters, when it comes to pandemics, it's so easy to wipe out rural women's voices. It's so easy to say, you don't matter. Now, right now, the policies and plans that are being implemented here in Sri Lanka itself, it's really challenging for women. Now, for example, last week, 25 families went into quarantine in Jaffna district, and they're all daily income earners. So there is no effort made to their food source, no thought process into already these are areas that are, under a lot of issues in terms of drug and alcohol abuse. So what is it for women and children to be quarantined with the men in this setting? So really now, post-COVID, we have to say one is how do we make these women matter, and they have to really engage directly with the processes in times of disaster and pandemic. And two, the traditional forms of communication for rural women, which is meetings, physical contact, is something that's not happening. So that's why, elements of this project really in saying what is that social media space or virtual space that I, as a rural woman, can really capture in order to continue the sustainability of my movement, really addressing violence against women becomes really important.
Thank you, Maitri, for your comments. Now that we've got Kamini back, I will just reiterate the question of how vital is it to have mechanisms to empower young people as change makers who could positively influence the harmful gender norms in their societies. I would really love to hear a little bit of insight from you.
Thank you. And it's a very important question. I think, well, Shanti Margam was formed for the purpose of working with children and young people, understanding the role that they play and what they can become as adults in the future. So, young people, children have to be involved right from the beginning because the gender norming happens at home. And the work that we do at Shantimagam is a lot around breaking through those gender norms, harmful attitudes that are created, and the acceptance of violence. So, for example, Shantimagam, our key aspect of community outreach is with urban poverty settings in Colombo, Gautamipura, Obesekarpura, etc. They see a lot of violence day to day. And so when we started the center, you could see so many the girls and the boys playing these very typical gender normed roles, and we would have these continuous conversations. Okay, why does this person have to do this? Why is it that a boy can't ride a pink bike, for example? And 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 it also has to be a very constant process of working with young people. And for me, I remember some of the really inspiring moments I've seen is, for example, when a boy was aggressive towards a girl during one of the discussions, and she said, I don't like that. I don't want that to happen anymore. And these children are the future of our country, of our world. And I think it's so important that we break through these very harmful attitudes and norms and work with young people to let them know how are they're such important agents of change. Because even for me, what I have found, what I have observed in my work in Sri Lanka is the youth engagement, and Senel can add to this. It's a bit more on the surface. It's like, okay, so we have 6 young people at this panel, but it's a lot more than that. And as soon as you give power to young people, they will start using it. So this is how we try to do it. And we are also trying to create
We want a core group of young people to actually guide us. We have to be accountable to young people if we are an organization that is there to serve them. So we have also been trying to build leadership and also encourage their voices and feedback, because from a very young age, they need that skill of leadership. So all these combined together are important if we really want to see um, n- a reduction of violence against women and violence in communities, because all of this is one continuum.
Thank you, Kamini. I'm sure that you will do absolutely amazing work on that front. And since you mentioned Sanel, so there is this notion that if you are a good woman, if you are a good person, then you will not be affected by violence against you. Or it all depends on what you wear, where you go, who you associate with. And since you've put down all the amazing impact stories in this book, what do you think is the actual, like, what have you learned through this journey?
Thanks, Afra, and I think yeah, that comment is interesting because I think a lot of us grew up thinking this way as well, right? A lot of us feel this way, and then we see the kind of facts that Kamini showed us today. That 90% of women using public transport face harassment. So are we saying 90% of Sri Lankan women are bad women? Like, so then you learn to get out of these things, and then you see on the news little girls in school uniform getting harassed, and women of all ages, all ethnicities, and so on face violence. And then you realize that it's actually an issue much bigger than who's good and bad. It's a lot more complex, and it affects almost all women. It affects all women I know in my family, friend circles, and so on. But also beyond us, and that captures. And I think that some of the stories that we were able to tell as a part of the project also captured some of these stories. And I think the reason why some of those theories are important as well is because we are also constantly told that this is an issue that a few women in the city are trying to raise, or that this is an NGO issue, or this is only academics see these issues and things like that. But I think when we were able to feature stories of a woman who's a grandmother talking about why gender equality is important, or a boy just after A levels talking about why he thinks violence against women and girls is bad, or a woman who is working at a divisional secretariat as a women development office telling, I want to change things in our community. I think those stories were so important. And we were also able to tell stories that were not just talking about the problem, but we also featured some of the solutions that these people were engaging in as well. So women weren't just, powerless people in families being affected by this, but they were actually doing things to change their families, their communities for the better as well. They were doing street dramas and poster campaigns and workshops and all of these really cool things to change things on the ground. So I think that's why some of these stories were super important to be told.
Is there anyone else on the panel who wants to add to it? Because I see all of you all are nodding your head tremendously through it. Kamini?
I wholeheartedly agree with what Sanel had to say, and the aspect of believing that then all 90% of women who experience sexual harassment are bad women. And also, we have so much victim blaming in our country. It's unbelievable. Some things, these are additional lots of data that came up from the CARE study, and there is a real need to look beyond and see what is really happening. The statistics are very strong, and we also have to understand that with reporting there are so many issues, because say for example, if a community believes that a woman who has had an experience of gender-based violence in whatever form, there's something wrong with her, because that is the kind of myth or victim blaming that we constantly see. So I feel it's so important that and this is why we need to work towards social norm change as well, because because if we are in a community of impunity or where there's no accountability towards these issues, then it just people start taking action on their own. But I mean, going back to some of the work I've been involved in at Care International, when we used to have these village level action groups, also communities took responsibility of gender-based violence and addressing it. And one of the key things is, it's so normalized sometimes that people don't even realize that they're actually experiencing violence. and gender-based violence. So it's I think, yeah, it's very important, and this is why I say, like, we're constantly trying to have to make
Yeah.
people understand that this is an issue.
Samita, do you want to add on to that? Yes. I
Yes,
feel
yes.
like everyone on the panel will add on. Go on.
I mean, like, of course, I just want to add to what Senil and Kamini said. This sometimes, people expect. I mean, like, the idea that violence is a matter of women's behavior, and that if women kind of behave well, she will not undergo violence. It against kind of gives the impression that women should tolerate everything. So that is how we have been brought up, to kind of take everything in and tolerate, not to say a word about it. So nobody knows that whether I'm going through violence or whether I'm going through hell. So as far as I keep quiet, and as far as our society is kind of accept violence as a kind of a private matter within the family, everything seems quite well. And the moment that women step forward and say a word about it, as Kamini said, then there comes the victim blaming. So I think this culture of women tolerating everything is the kind of feeling that we always have, that the women have to well behave if they are to kind of stay away from violence. So that part I need to kind of add to that.
Sure. Maitri, you have anything to?
Yeah, I just wanted to share, a story that really encapsulates the silent endurance form that really women practice. We were working on the issue of sexual bribery and sexual exploitation. In the village in the northern province, it was just a normal, very close to a consultation in order to enable these women to talk about this sensitive issue. And the question posed to them was, do you encounter sexual bribery? And the answer is yes, we do. The next question is, okay, when do you encounter it? And then the answer is, when I step out of the house. So they're like, okay, no, we meant literally like when. And they're like, yes, when I step out of the house for any of my need. And in that village discussion, it was all the women in that discussion. All the women had been subjected to that kind of violence. And we think, okay, these are like, they're going to take, ask big things, do big things. No, a study actually showed us that, a woman heads of household went to ask for help regarding her child's shoes, and she was asked for sexual bribery. So it's as mundane, or it's small as that, but the issue is so deep rooted that you can see the silence of the women, the normalization of that entire abuse and violence, and the prevalence of it, and the acceptance of it in a structural manner that has to be broken.
Thank you. I think that gives us a lot of insight into what's actually happening on the grassroots levels. And I hope that when you go into your communities, that you don't just imagine that just because they are tolerating it and they are holding it all inside, that everything is perfect in their lives. Do you think that so obviously with all of these things there are specific norms that come out? Maitri, do you think out of all the norms that you've had to fight through in this battle, what do you think were the most hardest to break than others?
The biggest challenge is violence against women in elections. It's been a huge challenge getting women into the political sphere, into governance bodies. And, we saw it even with these elections. The nominations were given in a very tokenistic manner. A very clear message that when it really comes a critical moment in our history, in our country, there's no place for women. You can come next time. And, in our advocacy process for legal reform, policy reform at the national level, we saw that the opposition is not only from people that you expect will oppose this. So it's not only from politicians who are going to say, okay, if she comes in, she takes my seat. And it's not only from elected members who are already in power and who want that status quo to remain, but you also get it from bureaucrats, government officers, people you think who won't have an opinion about this or who would be neutral to it. And there's like various other sectors as you dive in. The opposition is very strong because that provides a key space for women to come into decision making, which will, I think, be a key factor that will change the entire process through which we're addressing violence against women.
Thank you, Maitri. And that actually brings us to the end of this conversation. I know me personally would love to continue talking about it and bringing you a lot of conversation points. But at this point, I would say please do download the booklet and read through the report, read the stories that have come out, go through all the organizations which are on this panel and see the work they're doing, and hopefully be, as she said, make the change as youth as well as adults to bring us a safer environment for women and girls. So thank you, Sanal, Maitri, Kamani, Savanthi, all of y'all who have been here today, as well as Jill and Charo who sent us their voice messages. Thank you so much for being here. Before we wrap up, just a few things. If we can have the slide that comes in. So we have a few updates on how you can go through the booklet. It's currently in English, and then so the online booklet will be uploaded on the British Council site after this session. So please do go in and check it out. There will be Sinhala and Tamil translated versions as well. They will be uploaded on the 10th of December. So we are still continuing with the trilingual aspect because we know that these stories need to be heard. Definitely join the hashtag Her Safe Space during the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, which is from 25th November to 10th December. So do interact and share your comments, share your stories, and make a difference just over your phone. So make a post today and share your story, and we would really love to hear it. And I'm sure, and you will know that Senel is watching, and he will be curating your stories. So that brings us to the end of today. I hope that you have an amazing day ahead of you, and you make a change in your own communities. Thank you so much, and have a good day.